defense minister wants us to believe that he only recently learned how wrong his statements were on the role of the Red Cross in Afghanistan, even though he and the foreign affairs minister received a personal briefing last September. Now, access documents show if he had bothered to read his own ministerial briefing books, he would have known since October that the Red Cross only has the right to visit detainees and is not responsible to monitor them. How can the minister expect Canadians to believe his so-called distortion were not deliberate when his answer were at his fingertips for months?
My statements here in the House were made in good faith and based on the understanding that I had. We will make sure that detainees are treated properly, and we have engaged the Afghan Human Rights Commission, and they will go into the Afghan system and they will report anything wrong with respect to detainees.
There are few things more important for the honor of a country than to protect the human lives under its duty, including war detainees. It's clear that this Minister of Defense failed to this duty, even though he has been briefed on this many often. So I have no other choice than to ask to the Prime Minister to ask his Minister of Defense to do the honorable thing and resign.
The Minister of National Defence has provided a clear explanation to the House of Commons. This government was, as he knows at the time, operating under an agreement signed by the previous government. We've since entered into a new arrangement with the independent Afghan Human Rights Commission. Mr. Speaker, I can understand the passion that the Leader of the Opposition and members of his party feel for Taliban prisoners. I just wish occasionally they show the same passion for Canadian soldiers.
First, he said that the government doesn't care about human rights, and second, that the official opposition doesn't care about Canadian soldiers. The Prime Minister must understand that he insulted the Parliament, and the entire Parliament, with his statement, and he should apologize.
Mr. Speaker, I said absolutely no such thing. What I said, Mr. Speaker, clearly was that the government does care about this issue. That's precisely why the Minister of National Defence, upon learning the information he learned, has acted to correct the situation, and we will continue to monitor the situation to make sure we make progress. Mr. Speaker, the only other point I'm making is that I'd like to see more support in this House of Commons from all sides for Canadian men and women in uniform. I think Canadians expect that from parliamentarians of every party. They haven't been getting it, and they deserve it.
We've heard from minister after minister that the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission will monitor prisoners transferred by Canada. Yesterday, the Prime Minister told the House that the government will, quote, ensure that they have the capacity to undertake the terms of the agreement. But this is ridiculous. The Afghan Commission's got 7 staff and no access to prisons. Why didn't the Prime Minister make sure that the Commission had this capacity before signing the agreement and before telling the House on countless occasions that they could do the job?
Again, Mr. Speaker, our officials are in ongoing communication with the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission. We've offered any help that is necessary. We're not at the moment told of the problems that are being reported in the papers today. Obviously, if there are such problems, we will act.
This government's handling of the whole affair has been disgraceful. The Prime Minister and the Minister of Defence don't seem to understand that the honour of Canada is at stake. We need to ensure that our military uphold the best traditions they've always upheld of complying with the Geneva Convention. There's no conceivable reason to keep this mission under the control of a minister who doesn't seem to know which way is up. Mr. Speaker, will the Prime Minister stop this sickening charade and fire that Minister of Defence?
I think what's disgraceful, Mr. Speaker, is to simply accept the allegations of some Taliban suspects at face value, Mr. Speaker. That's not appropriate for Canadian Member of Parliament.
The Minister of Defence misled the House again yesterday. He said he claimed that these allegations were simply rumours and that the Human Rights Commission in Afghanistan was going to be responsible for the situation. Now we learn that the head of that commission is barred from going to the prisons. What more does it take for the Prime Minister to issue an instruction to his incompetent Minister of Defence that the transfers should stop now, pending the truth? Why won't he stand up and make that instruction today?
I look again the minister straight in the eye. Will the minister, look at me, will the minister admit that he learned about allegation of torture through the media and that his arrangement with the Afghan Human Rights Commission is a sham? When will the Minister of Defense realize that the only way to protect our reputation in the world is to resign?
As I've said, the Independent Human Rights Commission is in regular contact with our people, and if they need any assistance, we will provide that assistance. To date, they have not asked for any assistance.
Can the minister tell Canadians what immediate steps he is taking to verify that detainees captured by Canadian forces in Afghanistan and transferred to Afghan authorities are being properly treated?
Our government has asked a number of officials to contact the Afghan government, the various elements of the Afghan government that have to do with detainees, to confirm whether there is any truth to the allegations, the rumors and allegations that are in the media, and they will report back to us. If there is any foundation for this, we will be dealing with the Afghan government to ensure that they are corrected.
Mr. Speaker, this government was told by their own officials that detainees face a high risk of torture, extrajudicial executions. But yesterday, the Prime Minister told this House that he had no evidence at all to support these allegations. Why did the Prime Minister hide from Canadians the fact that he had received this damning report?
The Leader of the Opposition should know that annual reports on governance, democratic development and human rights have been prepared by our embassy in Afghanistan since 2002. They document general concerns. They also document the various actions that the government and its officials are taking to deal with those concerns, Mr. Speaker. We have no evidence of the specific allegations that appeared this week in the Globe and Mail, but obviously, Mr. Speaker, as I've indicated, we take any such allegations seriously. Officials are working with their Afghan counterparts, and I'm told receiving full cooperation getting the facts.
Who told Foreign Affairs officials to release only positive section of this report? Who told them to black out those sections that warn about these potential abuses? Who told officials to deny the very existence of this report on human rights issues in Afghanistan? Was it the Minister of Foreign Affairs? Was it the Minister of Defense? Or was it the Prime Minister?
Right Honourable the Prime Minister.
Well, I wondered how long it would be till we got the conspiracy theories going, but Mr. Speaker, the reality is this. The Leader of the Opposition is a former Minister of the Crown. He knows what the process is. The process, Mr. Speaker, is very simple. When it comes to access to information, these decisions are made by government lawyers. They do not consult politicians or ministers. They act according to the law, and their decisions, Mr. Speaker, can always be appealed to the Access to Information Commissioner.
We now have a report by officials warning the Conservative government of torture, abuse and murder in those prisons. After first denying the existence of the report, the document was released with disturbing sentences blacked out. Who among the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defence and the Minister of Foreign Affairs saw the report, and above all, who ordered the cover-up?
Speaker, I think I've already answered the question on the process. The Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party, I suppose, hasn't been in government, doesn't understand the access to information process. I can say this, Mr. Speaker. It's a general report, as he knows, a general report prepared for the last 5 years on some of the challenges in Afghanistan, some of the actions taken. But let me quote another section of the report, Mr. Speaker, which also said, judges and prosecutors are being trained, more defendants are being represented, courthouses and prisons are being built or improved, and the capacity of the permanent justice institutions are being enhanced. Mr. Speaker, we're not under any illusion there are big challenges in Afghanistan, but progress is being made.
Foreign Affairs originally said the report did not exist. Now we know it does. Did the Prime Minister's office order the document erased? When will the Prime Minister erase this Minister of Defense from his portfolio?
No one has denied that reports exist. There was a general application for all reports. Now, Mr. Speaker, I just heard something in this House from a former finance minister who has called the Minister of Defense a chicken. This is a man who has served his country in uniform for over 30 years. The only thing he's left is an army of carpetbaggers and fundraisers.
if you take into account the misleading about the Red Cross, the misleading about the ability and the willingness of the Human Rights Commission to monitor the situation, and if you take into account the denial of the existence of the 2006 report and then blacking out of the substantial portions of it, that is, sir, the making of a massive, colossal, systematic cover-up. And you stand accused, along with the Prime Minister and the Minister of External Affairs, of perpetrating a fraud on Canadians and on the House of Commons by concealing all of this information from Canadians and not being honest with them.
Well, I know when you're in opposition, you think of cover-ups or conspiracies and all these things, but as you know, because you were in government, it doesn't actually happen that way. I don't know anything about the handling of the report out of Foreign Affairs, but typically, as you know, in ATI, there's an ATI system in every department, and there's somebody responsible to go and get the information. There are lawyers in every department to determine what gets severed and what doesn't, and I can only assume that that process was followed in Foreign Affairs, but there's no conspiracy out there. As I said, we have an agreement with the Afghan government, we have an agreement with the human rights, and we expect them to live by their agreements. And that's why a number of our officials are involved now with the Afghan government and the Human Rights Commission to confirm, for instance, recent allegations, which are media allegations. What's the validity of these allegations? And if there is validity, what corrective actions will be taken? So that's going on. But in addition to that, within the last few days, we have basically have made an arrangement with the government in the Kandahar province so that we can have access to our detainees. So henceforth, our military, but it can be anybody, can have access to our detainees. But what we want is we want these agreements enforced. We want the Afghan government to live by their word. We want the Human Rights Commission to live by their word. And contrary to what it says in the newspaper about the Afghan Human Rights Commission, our people have been in constant contact with the Human Rights Commission. And they have asked them if there's any problems, if they need any help. They said they had, in effect, some minor problems that they would deal with themselves. They have never asked for our help. We are going back at them again in the last day or two to confirm the facts that have been put in the media, to find out if there's any truth to what they're saying, because we have a different story.
Well, now, the Minister of Defense said our military can have access to our detainees. But the Chief of Defense Staff, not aware of the so-called agreement, said that's not our area of expertise. It wouldn't be soldiers who would monitor the detainee situation. So who's right? The minister or the general? And if there is an agreement, why won't the Prime Minister show it to Canadians right now?
The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Order.
Mr. Speaker, once again, I suggested to the Leader of the Opposition that he have the facts before making allegations against the Canadian military. Truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is we have consulted with the government of Afghanistan over the past several days. We have found no evidence there is any access blocked to the prisons. In fact, Mr. Speaker, not only are Afghan authorities agreeing to access to the prison, they actually agree that they will formalize that agreement, so there is no potential misunderstanding. Mr. Speaker, these allegations were made recklessly, they were made without information, and the Leader of the Opposition should apologize to the Canadian military.
My question to the Prime Minister is, does he still have confidence in his Minister of National Defense?
What I don't have confidence in is the Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, we will conclude a formal agreement so that we never again face these kinds of baseless accusations. The fact of the matter is this, Mr. Speaker, the real problem is the willingness of the Leader of the Liberal Party and his colleagues to believe, to repeat, and to exaggerate any charge against the Canadian military as they fight these fanatics and killers that are called the Taliban. It is a disgrace, Mr. Speaker.
Exactly.
The Defence Minister said yesterday that they'd reached an access agreement with the government in Kandahar province. Then he released a statement saying the arrangement was actually with the NDS, an intelligence police accused of torture in the Foreign Affairs report released last week. Now we have two conflicting stories, plus an improvised arrangement with an outfit known to practice the torture we're trying to prevent. Mr. Speaker, I know the Prime Minister hates to admit when he's wrong, but this farce has gone on long enough.
I said this government would take the time to get the facts. Public Security has consulted with their counterparts in the Afghan prison system. National Defense has done similarly. The Department of Foreign Affairs has been in touch with the Afghan government and other Afghan agencies. And I gather today the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission held a press conference in Kabul to correct the record on some of these matters. The only person wrong is the deputy leader when he made allegations that we could not get access and nobody could get access to prisons in Afghanistan. That's false, and rather than repeat it, he should withdraw it.
Yesterday, the Minister of Defense said there was an agreement. There was no agreement. He misled Canadians. Crystal clear, after having said for ages that we didn't need one. Now the Prime Minister is saying we don't have one now, we've had access all along, and we're going to get an agreement anyway. Have we used the access? Have we used it? Have we fulfilled our responsibilities? And when's he going to fight?
Mr. Speaker, they're always intent wanting to hear false allegations, but when it comes to hearing the truth, they try and shout it down. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that for a considerable period of time now, our own corrections service here in Canada has had corrections officers working in Kandahar. Matter of fact, I talked with one of them 2 days ago, Mr. Speaker, 15 times already. She has had access to the prison facility in Kandahar, has full access. Wow. Also did a visit yesterday to the detention facility. Improvements are being made. It's difficult. It's moving, but it's difficult. But improvements are being made, Mr. Speaker.
Why was this information, these so-called facts, not brought up in this House before? What is going on here? Are we seeing fabrication on the fly? Are we seeing serious policy making? Are we seeing responsible government? The fact is no. We're seeing day by day a patchwork quilt of inventions and fabrications.
I said repeatedly to the leader of the NDP and others in the House this week that the facts that the allegations they were making did not accord with the facts as we understood them. I undertook that we would consult over the next few days to see what the facts are. I can tell them that this allegation that there is no access to the Afghan prisons turns out to be completely false, and I understand the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission has denied other things today about that were reported about them. The question, Mr. Speaker, is why the leader of the NDP doesn't simply withdraw the allegation rather than continuing to bash the mission and the Canadian military.
So who is doing it? And is the Prime Minister able to guarantee that these detainees are indeed considered according to the Geneva Conventions?
The Right Honourable the Prime Minister.
I'll spell it out for the Leader of the Opposition. For 4 years, in spite of repeated reports about these kinds of concerns in Afghanistan, the previous Liberal government had no policy on detainees whatsoever. In the dying days of that administration, an agreement was signed. We have since improved that agreement, and we're working with the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission on that agreement. We have subsequently received additional information and willingness from the Afghan authorities to open any prison to any branch of the Canadian government through a formal agreement. We will pursue such a formal agreement, and I wish the Leader of the Opposition, rather than continuing to justify the accusation, would just withdraw it.
I had a chance this afternoon at the Provincial Reconstruction Team and a little bit here at Kandahar Airfield to talk to a variety of soldiers. And let me just come out and say very frankly here, I met a variety of soldiers who are pissed off. They're angry that these allegations have detracted from the overall mission here, the focus back in Canada specifically on the enormous amount of good that's being done, on the incredible things that are happening here in Kandahar province and around the rest of Afghanistan, and the additional security and the stability and the hope for a future that we are bringing to millions of Afghans. So I met some soldiers this afternoon who, in their opinion, are pissed off because the focus has moved and based on issues that are being addressed, and that was their opinion.
Are you, sir, quote, pissed off yourself?
No, I didn't say that. I said some soldiers explained that very carefully to me. I never get pissed off. We have business to do. You heard what my focus is as looking after Canada's sons and daughters as they do the job here, and that's what I remain focused on. I would also tell you that part of my discussion with the Governor of Kandahar this afternoon was him articulating his frustrations to me at allegations being made here about his country, about his government being accepted as straight fact back in Canada.
Mr. Speaker, this is disgusting. We support the troops. Everybody in this House support the troops.
Absolument.